제가 되게 오고 싶었던 기업이었는데요. 여러분들도 이제 블록체인에 대해서 많이 관심을 가지는데 또 미국에 있는 블록체인 기업 중에서 또 유명한 기업이 하나 있었죠. 블록이라는 기업입니다. 저희가 인터뷰를 해보도록 하겠습니다. 반갑습니다. 예.
Could you start by introducing yourself and share what you're doing at Block?
Yeah, so I am the product lead at Bitkey, which is a self-custody hardware wallet for Bitcoin. It helps users store their Bitcoin safely, and we're building it so that people have an easy and safe way to store their Bitcoin.
우리는 이제 블록이라는 회사를 보면 캐시에만 알고 있는데 주력 사업이 비트키와 캐시 있고 다른 것도 있나 들어볼 수 있을까요?
So when we think about Block, people are reminded of the Cash App, and we also have Bitkey. But are there other projects that are ongoing within Block?
Yes, so Block is probably best known for Square, which is a product that helps merchants grow their businesses. They're also very well known for Cash App, which helps customers save, store, spend their money. But the founder of Block, Jack Dorsey, has been a long-time Bitcoin supporter and really believes in Bitcoin and the protocol in the future. And so while both Square and Cash App both have Bitcoin features built into them, there are also other initiatives at Block that are just Bitcoin focused. One of them is Bitkey, which is our wallet product. And the other one is Proto, which is our mining product.
비트키라는 거에서 우리가 좀 무엇인지 좀 알고 싶거든요. 어떤 겁니까, 이게?
So we're curious about what Bitkey is. Could you explain to us about the product?
Yes, so I have one here. It's a hardware wallet. And so when you have Bitcoin, there are two ways to hold it. You can either hold it in self-custody, which means you control all of the keys, and I can talk a lot about sort of the nuances of self-custody and why it's important, or you hold it on an exchange where somebody holds the Bitcoin for you. And Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin really special is the ability to hold it in self-custody. And so Bitkey is a product that makes it very easy to hold your Bitcoin safely yourself.
그러면 이 사업이 블록 내 다른 사업이랑 연관이 있는 건가요?
So is this project related to other projects within Block? How is it related?
Yeah, there's a lot of different Bitcoin projects going on. They're related in that they're all trying to make Bitcoin easier to use, safer to use, and more decentralized, which makes Bitcoin better. Bitkey itself is focused on the custody, the ownership part of Bitkey, because self-custody is so important.
콜드 월렛에 대해서 이제 모르시는 분들 많으니까 좀 쉽게 좀 이해하고 싶은데 소프트 월렛도 있고 콜드 월렛도 있는데 어떤 차이가 있는 건가요?
So we want to know more about what cold wallets are. Could you explain to us the difference between a cold wallet versus a soft wallet?
Yes. So I think the right place to start is to understand how Bitcoin security works. A decent analogy is sort of like email, where for an email you have a public address that you give to everybody, and they use that address to send you emails. And you have a secret, a private password. And with that password, you can send emails from your account to other people. And so Bitcoin works similarly, where you have a public address that people can send to you, and then you have a secret. And with that secret, you can send Bitcoin. The difference between software wallets, or hot wallets, they're sometimes called, and hardware wallets, cold wallets, is how that secret is stored. And so that secret key, so in the email example, we call it a password. In Bitcoin, it's called a key. When that key is stored on a device that's connected to the internet, it's a software wallet or a hot wallet. And that is less safe than if you were to take that secret and put it on a device that doesn't connect to the internet. And so hardware wallets are safer because the keys are inside the hardware wallet, and this device, and any hardware device, is not connected to the internet. So an attacker, in order to get the key, would need to physically get the device.
그럼 이제 코인을 많이 가진 부자일수록 이제 해킹을 당하면 안 되기 때문에 더 하드 월렛에 대한 수요가 클 수밖에 없겠네요.
So in that case, heavy holders of Bitcoin, they must have a greater demand for these wallets because the more they're worrying about security, right?
Yes, exactly. So as you get more and more Bitcoin, or your wealth in Bitcoin increases, you start to worry about different types of risks. And so one of the very first risks you worry about is who's holding my Bitcoin. And so when you have it on an exchange, it might get hacked, or they might lose it, or they might be irresponsible, or there's a lot of ways to lose it on the exchange. So the first step is to take it off an exchange and move it into a wallet you control. Should I keep going or pause?
Oh, it's up to you.
Okay, yeah, maybe let pause there and then I'll keep going.
Okay.
So then, once you move it off an exchange into a wallet you control, now you're worried about, well, what if somebody hacks my phone or steals my secrets? And so you don't want your secret on a device that's connected to the internet. So then you upgrade your storage again and you move to what we call hardware wallets or cold storage, where you take the secrets and you put them inside the device. And so the way Bitkey works is on your phone, there is a wallet. And so this is where you see your balance. But in order to send a Bitcoin, you need to tap the hardware device. And so when you tap it, like when you pay with a credit card, this device will sign a transaction and then my Bitcoin can move. And so my secrets stay on the hardware device.
그러면 다른 하드 월렛과 여기에 있는 비트키 하드 월렛은 어떤 차이점이 있는지 좀 들어.
So could you explain to us how Block's your hard wallet is different from other hard wallets in the market?
Yeah, yes, I'd love to. So I think there's one really important difference that is how we store the secrets. And so if you were to lose this, you don't want to lose your Bitcoin. And so what most hardware wallets do is they give you a backup. And so you set up your hardware wallet and then they give you this secret sentence. It's 12 words. And those 12 words can be used to recreate the secret inside of the hardware wallet. And the problem with that solution, that approach, is now it's my job to protect those 12 words. And so I'll tell you a story about my friend about those 12 words, maybe in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to finish why Bitkey is different, and then I'll tell you my story. But Bitkey has a different recovery system so that we don't have to give you those 12 words. So we don't give seed phrases. Those 12 words are called a seed phrase. And we have a system that can recover your wallet and your Bitcoin even if you lose your device. And so maybe I'll like tell a story about the seed phrases that is kind of funny, and then I'll tell you how our recovery system works.
Okay.
So one of my friends, Alex, he got into Bitcoin very early. And so he had a lot of money on Bitcoin. And he got a hardware wallet. And he set it up and he wrote down his seed phrase, his 12 words, in case he ever lost his hardware wallet. And so he took those 12 words and he wanted to hide it in different places. So he went to his parents' house and he hid it at their house. And his dad is a professor and has these rows and rows of bookshelves. And so he found a book that that always kind of stood out to him and has been there since he was a kid living at home. And he put his seed phrase, the paper, inside the book. And then about 6 or 7 months later, he comes back to visit his parents and he goes to look for the book and it's not on the bookshelf.
Oh no.
So he goes to his dad to say, hey, where's the book?
Yeah.
And he sees it sitting on his dad's desk.
Oh, okay.
So so he's now freaking out. So he immediately grabs the book and starts flipping through it and finds his seed phrase in there.
Oh.
So he feels, okay, safe. But then he thinks, what if somebody already stole it and moved the money? So then he opens up his wallet and says, okay, the money's still in the wallet. Okay, I'm safe. But then he realized, what if somebody saw it, wrote it down, and they're at home about to steal it? So he had to race home to set up a new wallet and move all of his funds off of it to his other, to a new wallet.
That's such an interesting story.
Yeah.
The importance about, why the seed phrase is not good.
Yes.
그럼 우리 지금 비트키 같은 경우도 시드 문구를 내가 잃어버릴 수도 있잖아요. 이건 어떻게 해야 돼요? 얘는?
Oh, so he's asking, but Bitkey doesn't have a C phrase, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So how does it work?
시드 문구 없어요?
The reason I like that story, or that, it's kind of scary, but it really highlights when you give customers a seed phrase, what you're giving them the responsibility to keep it safe. And so all electronics will break or die at some point. And so this device will break, your hardware wallet will break. And so you need, or you'll lose it. And so you need a way to get your wallet back when it breaks. Mm-hmm. Every other wallet uses the seed phrase approach. Mm-hmm. And when you give seed phrases to customers, you're saying, you figure it out. Bitkey wanted to take a different strategy and say, we're going to build a system that can recover your wallet even when you lose it.
예, 그걸 좀 들어보고 싶습니다. 이제 어떻게 해서 뭐 인증하는 거, 내가 소유 인증 어떻게 하는 건지, 아까 잃어버렸을 땐 어떻게 이걸 또 찾을 수 있는지, 예를 들어 지갑을 째로 잃어버릴 수도 있잖아요.
So for Bitkey, in that case, how would you recover if without a seed phrase?
Yes, Bitkey is a very cool piece of technology. So the way it works is there are 3 keys, not 1. And so, you know in the movies when they show like the nuclear weapons and they have 2 keys and you need 2 people to turn 2 keys at the same time in order to launch the missile? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And so that's how the Bitkey wallet works. There's 3 keys and you need 2 of them to move the money. So 1 key is stored in here on your device. 1 key is stored in your phone. So that's 2 keys. And then 1 key, the 3rd key, is held in Block's servers. And what's good about that is you have 2 keys. So you can always move your money by yourself. You never need Block. And Block has only 1 key. We can't move the money without you because we only have 1 key and we need your help to move the money. So let me pause there and then I'll explain the rest. So let's say I lose this device, all right? Let's say you steal it, okay? So you stole my key, okay? You stole it. So problem 1, there's a fingerprint, right? So now you can't get it. But let's say even if you could get by the finger, let's say I'm like sleeping, right? And you take my thumb and you press it. That's only 1 key. You need 2 to move the money. And so when I lose one of my keys, I still have 1 here, and then Block has 1 as well. And so I can go to Block and say, hey, I lost one of my keys. Could you help me recover the wallet? And so the key that Block holds on to is a recovery key. And so with the Block key and with your remaining key, we can move your money to a new wallet that's fixed. And so even if you lose your device, that's where our 3rd key helps.
Oh, okay.
아, 그러면 이걸 분실해도 걱정이 없는 거네요. 그러면 이제 그 다음 또 뭐냐면, 이런 수요가 지금 많아지고 있는지가 궁금하거든요. 지금 하드월렛에 대해서 이런 지금 사람들 수요가 얼마나 지금 빠르게 늘어나고 있는지.
We're curious about the demand for Bitkey for these kind of hard wallets. Could you like give us any insights into the trend and the demand?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of excitement over our seedless, no seed solution. A lot of people are nervous about getting into self-custody because it's a lot of responsibility. You know, when you leave your Bitcoin on an exchange, you don't have to take any responsibility over the safety of the Bitcoin, but you take on all of the risk of the exchange. When you take on self-custody, you take on all of the responsibility. And like my story of my friend, once you have that seed phrase, it can be very scary. Like, am I protecting it right? Did somebody steal it? If I lose my hardware, can I go and get it back? And so this message has really resonated with customers. And to have a solution where you don't have to protect secrets, you don't have to hide seed phrases, you just get the hardware, you get your phone, you have a wallet. And if you lose your hardware or your phone, Bitkey can be used to get your wallet back. We're basically holding a backup key for you. We even have a really cool version of the technology where even if you lose both your phone and your hardware, you can still recover your wallet. And so what we've been seeing from customers is a lot of excitement over just how easy Bitkey is to use and how hard it is to lose your keys.
When we think about the demand for hard wallets in general, would you say the demand is rising overall?
Yes. And I think the reason for that is there's a couple of reasons. One is as more people find out about Bitcoin, there's just more people in the market. And so I think that's driving demand. The other is as the price of Bitcoin rises, people get more and more concerned over the safety of their Bitcoin. And so we see a demand of people wanting safer and safer solutions. And that's where people start leaving exchanges to software wallets or leaving software wallets to hardware wallets. Or leaving, and I didn't explain this up front, but in the hardware wallet world, there's also multi-sig where you have more than one key. And so Bitkey is a multi-sig wallet because I was explaining the 3 keys. And so it's sort of at the, as you increase your needs for security, you see a higher and higher demand. And so we're seeing a lot of migration into those higher security Bitcoin systems.
And would you say there is in particular higher demand for Bitkey?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen a tremendous amount of growth. We don't share official numbers, but our growth trajectory has been very exciting.
Okay.
그러면 향후에 이제 이 비트키가 이제 블록 매출에서 몇 % 정도 차지할 거라고 좀 예상하는지.
So in the future, what percentage of revenue do you think Bitkey will generate for Block?
Oh, we don't share those numbers, yeah. But I can tell you that what we expect from sort of Bitkey is to grow not only in the amount of units we sell, which is kind of one dimension of growth, but what you see in the self-custody market is someone might buy a new wallet and then play with it. They'll put like a little money on it and like spend. Sort of real metric of success is for people to say, oh, out of all the wallets that I have or have access to, I feel the safest with this one. And they move most of their Bitcoin onto that wallet. When we look at growth, we're looking not only at unit sales, but about whether or not people think about Bitkey as their main storage solution or as a, like a side wallet.
How are you able to know about the second trend?
Yeah. So one great signal there is our inheritance product. Inside of Bitkey, we have a feature for inheritance that lets people pass the Bitcoin on to when they die. And the usage of that feature is a really good indicator of, are people storing generational wealth in Bitkey, or is it just a wallet for like day-to-day spending? And so the inheritance is our most asked about feature and something that people really appreciate about Bitkey because inheritance is particularly hard to do in Bitcoin. And so that's a very good signal for us.
그러면 이 매출 의존이 오로지 이 하드월렛 판매만 의존하는 거냐면 다른 매출 또 수익원이 있는지도 좀 궁금하거든요.
So within Bitkey, are there other revenue streams other than the sales of Bitkey?
Today, there's not. Today, our revenue stream is the hardware itself. We have a lot of ideas of additional features that we could add on that would probably, we haven't made any formal announcement about whether or not what features we're going to develop and how we're going to price them. Building financial services on top of Bitcoin and Bitkey. I think that's one of the bigger trends in the industry is I think the last 10 or 15 years has really been marked by how do I store my Bitcoin safely? And I think the next 10 to 15 years are going to be about how do I use Bitcoin? And that takes you into the world of financial services on Bitcoin. And that is, I think, a domain where financial services merit a fee or a charge or some sort of value accretion.
중요한 말씀 해주셨는데 앞으로 이 코인 쪽 웹3 코인 쪽 시장에서 이제 지갑이나 이제 거래소가 은행을 대체할 거다라는 얘기들이 나오는데 앞으로 미래에 그렇게 될 거라고 보시는지도 좀 궁금합니다.
So there are people who talk about how these self-custody wallets will eventually completely replace the traditional banks or exchanges that we currently use. Do you have any insights on that?
I think it'll definitely change. I don't know that it'll completely replace in the sense that what makes self-custody so important and so powerful is that anybody with a phone and an internet connection can create a Bitcoin wallet and receive Bitcoin for free. And so for a lot of the world that doesn't have access to a stable currency or doesn't have access to a stable banking system or a good legal system, I think those are scenarios where you're looking at where the word sort of replace is actually pretty true, like it's that sort of replacing a system. But I think the financial industry overall provides a lot of value beyond just sort of the storage and the transfer of money. And so things like loans or insurance or derivatives and so I think that there will always be a robust financial system, but it may change to be on top of the Bitcoin technology as opposed to being on the legacy technology. And so looking at how do you build a loans or an insurance product on top of self-custody Bitcoin instead of on top of, the traditional banking system.
그러면은 이제 지금 비트키에서 이 프로젝트 말고 또 다른 프로젝트 준비하고 있는 게 뭐가 있는지 궁금하거든요.
Within Block, what other Bitcoin-related projects are you working on other than Bitkey?
Yeah, so I can tell you a little bit about those. Me personally, I joined the Bitkey team and have only worked in the Bitkey team. I know a lot about that. There's other initiatives within Block that also work with Bitcoin. I mentioned Square is working on accepting Bitcoin payments. Cash App has an exchange where you can convert Bitcoin into dollars and back. There's a mining initiative where we're building Bitcoin miners to help decentralize mining. There's also work on lightning systems. And so there's just a lot of different things going on in Block about really sort of making Bitcoin more accessible.
여기가 비트코인만 하는 회사는 아닌 걸로 알고 있는데 그러면 비트코인만 하고 나머지 알트코인 쪽은 아예 손에 안 대는 건가요? 여기 사업이?
Are you just working on Bitcoin and what about like other altcoins?
We're a very Bitcoin ethos aligned company, and that comes all the way up from Jack. Bitcoin is special amongst all the other cryptos, both in its sort of purpose and its usage and its implementation. There's a focus almost entirely on Bitcoin. And so at Bitkey, which I know a lot more details on, we are a Bitcoin only wallet and don't plan to support other cryptocurrencies.
비트맥시, only Bitcoin
Yes.
user.
Oh,
yeah.
yes, Max.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
Max, yeah.
Yes. But before I worked at Block, I worked at basically altcoin places. And for me personally, like 2 years of seeing the scams and the hacks and it was enough for me to decide that for my personal career, I wanted to work on Bitcoin only. So I kind of went on that journey as well.
그럼 이 월렛에서 그러면 이제 어떻게 보면 비트코인만 한다 그러면 확장성에서 한계가 올 텐데 그럼 그걸 어떻게 극복하려고 하는지 좀 궁금하긴 하다라는 게 좀 있어요.
Since you are like solely focused on Bitcoin, there might be some scalability issues. Would you have plans on how to kind of overcome that limitation?
Yeah, there's a lot of work on Bitcoin scalability, and I think it's very important that I think there's a lot of work that goes into Lightning. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Spiral, but they're a team very closely associated with Block that does a lot of Lightning research and a lot of Lightning development. And I think there's a lot of really promising developments in the Bitcoin layer 2s that will help scale Bitcoin. But that being said, we're also seeing some of the lowest fees in Bitcoin we've ever seen just recently, which is personally, I think that's a little surprising. But nonetheless, scaling Bitcoin is a really important task that I think there's a lot of great work happening in.
그리고 이 회사 창업 스토리를 못 들었거든요. 이제 비트키 창업 스토리는 어떻게 되는 건지 좀 궁금합니다.
We're curious about the founding story of Bitkey. Could you tell us the founding story?
So Bitkey was sort of born out of the realization that self-custody is really important and self-custody is really hard. What makes Bitcoin so special is self-custody. And so Bitcoin is special because it's the first time we've had the ability to hold and send and receive money on public infrastructure. And what I mean by public is just nobody owns it. Like if you want to send somebody money today, not only are you using private corporations to do it, whether it's your private bank or your finance app, but you're also, the money that you're sending is in of itself government issued money that can be manipulated either through debasement or through interest rates or whatever. And so you have this sort of this backdrop of Bitcoin comes into the scene, and it's money that anybody can hold, anybody can send, and the price of it is determined entirely by the market. And those properties only come from self-custody. If everybody used Bitcoin in a custodial manner, where like you went to your exchange and your exchange is holding Bitcoin, well, you're back in a private system again. You're back in a permissioned system. And so in order to keep the power of Bitcoin alive, you need self-custody. And so that was really the driving force behind, well, why aren't people choosing self-custody? And the reason is that it's hard and it's scary. And when I talked about seed phrases, that's the thought that you're protecting your net wealth or your family's generational wealth to 12 words that you have to hide yourself. You have to figure out how to make it safe from flood or from theft or from fire or from, all of these things is really scary. And so at Bitkey, we wanted to make a system that was very easy to use, very hard to lose, and didn't put the responsibility on the customer to hide seed phrases, to keep their money safe.
그럼 지금 이번에 이제 비트키 이제 이게 미국 넘어서 지금 어느 나라에서 또 인기가 많이 있는지 좀 궁금합니다.
We're curious about the popularity of Bitkey. So apart from the US, do you know any other countries where it's popular right now?
Yeah, one of our top selling countries is Korea, actually, which is very exciting. We're available in 90 some odd countries, a little more than 90, and so we've seen sales across all of them. But Korea and APAC in general has been a very exciting region for us.
그러면 한국 사람들도 많이 쓴다는 얘기네요. 그러면 이제 그 다음 목표는 또 무엇인지 궁금하거든요. 이 비트키의 다음 목표.
What would be your next vision or goal for Bitkey?
Well, what we're focused on is really making Bitkey as easy to use as possible. And if you've tried self-custody before, it's pretty hard. I don't know what the popular money apps in Korea are, but anybody can open the app and start using it. And we want self-custody to be that easy. And so we're very focused in improving the usability of it. That's probably the first point. We're also very focused on security. And so we're always looking at ways to make it safer. So we're thinking through all the different ways you can be attacked or prevent hackers from trying to get to your Bitcoin. And then the third big initiative, the ones we're working on a lot this year, is privacy, is we want people to have financial privacy. And so we're working on ways to make sure that even though we build Bitkey, and even though you use our app, and even though we hold one of your keys, we still can't see your balances or your transactions. And so we want it to be the most private, the most secure, and the most usable wallet. And so our roadmap is dedicated to that.
비트코인 가격이 많이 올라가면서 사람들이 이제 더 관심을 많이 가지고 있는데, 가격이 오르는 건 좋지만, 또 보관에 대한 고민을 많이 하고 있었던 거였었어요. 근데 또 마침 또 이렇게 이런 하드 월렛이 또 계속 발전하는 모습을 보니까 앞으로 이제 이 크립토 세상이 점점 더 현실화된다라는 거를 이번 시간을 통해 느끼게 됐습니다.
As the price of Bitcoin has been rising, we are seeing more interest in Bitcoin and also hard wallets. But having get to meet you and learn about the hard wallet makes us realize that we're coming more and more closer to a crypto world. It's been inspiring and very impressive.
크립토 월드 파이팅.
Yes. Yes. Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yes.